Yeah, so I think, we as leaders, whether you're an officer, enlisted, or just in the general public, we have to acknowledge that we have to evolve. The leader that I was as a young corporal is not the leader that I was or am as a sergeant major. And I think a lot of times, we tell people like at the Sergeant Major's Academy when I was an instructor there that, hey, continue to do what got you thus far, because obviously you're doing something right. And I think that statement is good when we're talking about like your daily activities, your habits, like getting up early, reading books, and those type of things, seeking out leadership opportunities. But as a leader, though, we have to change and adapt the way we lead.
You're listening to the Tales of Leadership podcast. This podcast is for leaders at any phase on their leadership journey to become a more purposeful and accountable leader, what I like to call a pal. Join me on our journey together towards transformational leadership. All right, team, welcome back to the Tales of Leadership podcast. I am your host, Josh McMillian. I'm an active duty Army officer. I am an Army leadership coach. I am the founder of McMillian Leadership Coaching. But most importantly, I'm on a journey to be a better leader. And I bring people on this show to help me grow personally as a leader and to truly understand what it means to be what I like to call a purposeful, accountable leader. And my mission is to end toxic leadership by promoting transformational stories and skills. And on today's episode, I'm bringing you a transformational leader, a true servant leader, Randy McCoin. He is a proud U.S. Army soldier with over 29 years of service and the founder of the McCoin Institute. Randy knows the struggles of attending college while being a full-time soldier, as it took him 13 years to earn his undergraduate degree. Since then, he has earned a Master's of Education from Pennsylvania State University, a graduate certificate in International Student Services from Western Kentucky University, and a graduate certification in college advising from Columbia University. His passion is to help people, is to help soldiers, to help service members. And he does that and fills that out every single day. He is a purposeful, accountable leader. And I'll tell you right now, the world needs more people like Randy. As always, stay to the very end and you will get the top 3 takeaways that I have. And you can go to McMillionLeadershipCoaching.com. If you're listening to this episode, I have did a blog article accompanying this podcast episode that distills down the key points. So if you don't have 45 minutes to listen to an episode, you can take a quick read that'll take you 5 minutes and get the key takeaways from this episode. Let's go ahead and bring on Randy. Randy, welcome to the Tales of Leadership podcast. I know we said it before, but how are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be one of your guests.
Yeah, brother. You've been someone that I've known for a while, at least by supporting this whole platform that I had. And I thought it was humbling when I went to Fort Benning, now Fort Moore, and I was at the PX. I think I forgot something and I ran into you there. It's truly a small world, and I know you're still in the military and you're still full with purpose. So your time is valuable, and I genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here today.
Yeah. So I always love starting off with the same question because I have people from multiple different backgrounds, but just setting the framework of how you would define leadership through the years of service that you've had.
First of all, I would say that we as military leaders and leaders in general, we make leadership complicated, and it's really not that complicated. To me, leadership is as simple, and I know you've used this word before, as love, but I think it's about caring. You have to care. You have to care about the mission. You have to care about your subordinates, their families. It's as simple as a 4-letter word, whether you use love or care. That is what leadership is. I mean, we can put all these big definitions on it, the Army. I mean, there's probably 1,000 different definitions of leadership online. You can research that. And I'm in a doctorate program right now with the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And, most of my bringing up was focusing on certain leaders and their qualities and aspects of their way of leading. People like Patton and General Petraeus and people like that. But leadership really just comes down about caring about the people that you work with, your coworkers, your superiors, and of course your subordinates. The chief of the Army Reserve a few years ago, before he took over, General Lucky, I don't know if you know who he was, but when he took command of the Army Reserve, he said, look, as long as you're living the Army values and doing what's right per the Army
Yeah.
values, I've got your front, I've got your flank, and I've got your back. And that always stuck with me. So it's just about caring. This is really just that simple to me.
I think I made a post a long time ago, or it was one of the episodes that I did where I broke down the word meekness, because I think you and I share that, is that at the base or the core of my leadership foundation is what I term the word meekness, but I pulled it from a biblical aspect of how Jesus kind of led with being meek, and then breaking down that word. What does it mean? It's not weakness. It's engaged listening. It's evaluating the moment, your surroundings, and then keeping a servant's heart, understanding that acronyms, right? Hugs, humility, understanding, and then gratitude. And if you can keep those things centered in you, you'll show up authentically and you'll do your best. And at the end of the day, you'll inspire other people around you to do their best. And I love that.
I totally agree. And when we as leaders, in my opinion, when we show that we are human beings and we have weaknesses, all of us do, right? I don't know of anybody that don't have a weakness. Our subordinates, the people we work with, they gravitate to us more, and they want to accomplish more for us because they know we're human.
Yeah. Yeah. I am probably fraught with more more faults than most. And it's definitely gotten better throughout the years. But I would love to kind of tailor it back to starting off your leadership journey. Where did it start for you? Did it start by joining the military, or did it start before that?
It actually started before that, and I'm glad you asked it that way, because in 1991, when I started high school, I made the choice, and I think it was a good choice, to join the JRTC. And back in those days, JRTC has a different flavor now, but it was pretty much like being in the Army. I had two post-Vietnam sergeant majors, post-Vietnam full bird colonel, infantry type. Well, actually, all three of them were infantry type, and haircuts, uniform. It was like being in the Army. And I did, back then we called it the Ranger team, but now it's called the Raider team. So I think I was put into leadership early on. And, of course, looking back even beyond that, I think I gravitated to some leadership positions, but I think it was really in JRTC where I took on those leadership roles and sought out leadership opportunities.
Those leadership opportunities, did they come natural to you? I guess from a standpoint is when I was first starting out, and I really did a deep dive in all the different experiences I had all the way till grade school. And I never truly understood that I would naturally gravitate towards leadership positions. And I felt that it wasn't me who was choosing that. It was other people who were choosing me for that billet, if that makes sense. And when did you actively realize that, hey, like I am a leader that other people like respect?
I honestly, I think it was my senior year. Even though I was, by the way, I was a departmental honor student from my high school for that program. But I think it was my high school year when I had made the decision to go into the Army, and the leaders of our JRTC had picked me to be Battalion XO. But I said, hey, I don't want to be a Battalion XO, because a Battalion XO is not with cadets at the time. I wanted to be a company commander. And that's when I realized that I wanted to be with the troops. I wanted to be with the soldiers, the people who you're leading on a day-to-day. And then join the Army.
That's the one thing that I miss now. I don't know if you know that or not, but like I transitioned over to acquisitions. So I'm doing cost, schedule, and performance, focusing mostly on robotics, which is very humbling because it's the cutting edge of where we are within warfare. But the one thing that I miss most is being around soldiers. My favorite job in the world was being a company commander, and I always say that I had a blessing to do it twice. That was hands down my favorite job. And if you could tell me, hey, you can go be a company commander again, I would do it in a heartbeat, because I loved being around soldiers. And let's talk through that decision of what inspired you to actually join the military. I knew you joined ROTC, but what was that inspiration for you to look at this as a career field?
Yeah, well, first let me say, I think you were double blessed as a company commander because you were a company commander with the Ramrods.
Dude, I want to get into that. Yeah, I saw your platoon sergeant time, and I was like, man, it's a small world.
Yeah, very much, very is. No, so my dad was in the Marines for 16 years, and let me go back real quick and bring me back if you need to. So my dad was from Beckley, West Virginia.
Oh, that's our connection.
Yeah, and so I think that's where from our family we get our work ethic,
Yep.
and it just really drives you, it gives you a grit. Being from a descendant from West Virginia, it really drives you who you are. So my dad had a third grade education, but when he went in the Marine Corps, on his 214 when we buried him in 2015, it talked about how the Marine Corps had got him through grammar school. But I'll tell you, and the McCoin Institute, which we'll talk about more later, I'm sure, that's not named after me. I'm not that self-centered to name something after me. That's named after my dad, because
Oh,
my
wow.
dad was a lifelong learner. Even with a third grade education, he's probably the smartest man I've ever known. And I'm in a doctorate program, and I still think he was smarter than I am. So he was in the Marine Corps for 16 years. And two of my older brothers were in the Army. One was in the Marine Corps, like my dad, and the other one was in the Army and served during Desert Storm. And even with all that, I still think that my drive or desire really came from my mom. And the reason I say this is because I remember as a little boy, Chattanooga used to be known for having the grandest Memorial Day parade. I guess it's coming up here this coming weekend in Chattanooga. It used to be the largest. I don't know if it still is or not. I need to look into that. But my mom would take me to that. You'd have jets flying over. You'd have all these big. So that I think that's really where I got my sense of patriotism from, was my mom. And at age 82, because she's still alive, and maybe she'll see this video or hear the podcast, I don't know. But I tell you, my mom she was born in 1941, just days before December 7th, right? And I think as a little girl growing up in that time frame, my mom right now, if you told her to go and take on the Russian military at the age of 82, she would do it. She's that much of an American. So I think that's what initially got me into the service, to serve initially.
I love that connection to West Virginia, and I was going to bring that up because I was curious of where that was. So Beckley, West Virginia. I grew up in, I don't even know if you know where this is at or not, but Fenwick, West Virginia, which is just outside of Richwood and Summersville. So from Summersville, I think you jump on 64. I can't remember. It's been a while, or 19. And then you can get into Beckley probably 40 minutes driving through Fayetteville. That's a different level of America if no one's been there. It's just a different level of grit. My father was a coal miner.
Nice.
His father was a coal miner. My dad, and I love that connection because I also have a deep connection with my father, and that's where I think I get all my work ethic. He was a coal miner, still is, gets up at 3 every morning, works and gets home maybe at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, still cuts grass and goes and cuts grass for his neighbors, as some of his elderly neighbors. He's just a better man than I'll ever be. And it's just a different level of grit and work ethic that I've shared. And I'm hoping I can instill that in my kids. We're actually going back home next week to hopefully go spring gobbler hunting, take the kids for the first time. So I'm pumped about that.
Yeah, I honestly, and shamefully, I admit, I have not been back in many years to West Virginia. I never actually lived there, but now that I'm retired, or we're going to be retired next month, I definitely want to plan to get up into the mountains and see that beautiful country.
If we ever get an opportunity, I would love to take you trout fishing. We can go up to the Monongahela National Forest where the cranberries are. It's really close to my house. Once you're retired, and maybe we could plan like an actual fishing trip. That'd be awesome.
It sounds fun.
So kind of tailoring it back towards that inspiration to join the military. When you joined the military, what were some of your initial thoughts and just experiences at that junior rank before you really made more of like a senior non-commissioned officer?
I love the Army, and I still love the Army to this day. I got out. So I got out of the Army as a staff sergeant in 2001 in June, with the hopes of going to Chattanooga State. And obviously, 9/11 happened. And so my reserve, so I admit, when I left active duty, I went into the reserves because I said, I'm going to continue to do this, even if it's on the reserve side, because I love the Army that much. But then 9/11 happened, and then 2 days later, my reserve detachment got called up to Fort Campbell, where I spent the next 2 years. And even though I was on the reserve books for like the next 8 years, all that time pretty much was active duty. It was either mobilized, Iraq, or AGR time period. In 2008, I refratted. I don't know if you know what that means or not, but I refratted, released from active duty, and came back on active duty and went to on active duty roles and went to Korea, where I was a platoon sergeant. But my first duty station was Fort Drum, and it was just fun, high intensity training in the early '90s, mid '90s. 10th Mountain only had 2 brigades. We were constantly training, constantly going.
You would not be disappointed that it is still that exact same way. 3 brigades now. 2 moved to I can't think of the new installation's name. It's Fort Polk, Fort Johnson.
Yeah,
and that they are there supporting the other brigades that rotate through JRTC, but they also help augment. I have done more JRTC rotations, and we shared that too because I was an OCT, but 10th Mountain has not changed their op tempo. I've done more live fire exercise with that organization, and I am a T at it. So when you were transitioning through the ranks in terms of just leadership skills that you had, were there any specific skills that you picked up along the way that you thought were the most valuable, specifically when you were starting off at a junior rank and then you started to transition to more senior ranks?
Yeah, so I think, we as leaders, whether you're officer, enlisted, or just in the general public, we have to acknowledge that we have to evolve. The leader that I was as a young corporal is not the leader that I was or am as a sergeant major. And I think a lot of times, we tell people, like at the Sergeant Major's Academy when I was an instructor there, that, hey, continue to do what got you thus far, because obviously you're doing something right. And I think that statement is good when we're talking about like your daily activities, your habits, like getting up early, reading books, and those type of things, seeking out leadership opportunities. But as a leader, though, we have to change and adapt the way we lead. And I did listen in one of my favorite podcasts that you did is obviously with General Petraeus, because he promoted me to start first class in Iraq. But he talked about how he has no set leadership style.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that. And it really opened my eyes and made me reflect because, back in the older days, we had directing, participating, and combined leadership. And I would like to say that I was combined. I think most people would say, oh, I'm combined because it sounds good. It's like a little bit of both. But I was probably less directive and more participative. I'm the type of leader that I try to get in there and do the work with my soldiers or subordinates, be a teammate. But that's not always the smart answer, right? Because sometimes, and especially as you move up, when you're a first sergeant, you probably don't have the time to participate as much. Not saying that most first sergeants or company commanders don't want to participate. I mean, I'm sure as a company commander, you wanted to get out there and do a lot of stuff with your platoons and squads. But if you're doing that daily, are you really leading your company?
Yeah.
Right. So, that's the thing I think is, early on, I was definitely more participative type of style. I don't even think we use those terms anymore in leadership for the Army, but that's what it was when I first came in. But I'm just saying we have to evolve as leaders. And if we don't, I think we're going to fail.
Yeah. I love this quote by Ralph Nader, and always sticks with me, is that the function of a leader is to produce more leaders, not more followers. And when I had General Petraeus on, by the way, that was just extremely humbling, reaching out to him and him actually being on the podcast, not from a standpoint of like any type of following that I would get, but just to learn from one of the most influential military figures of our times, which was super humbling. And I agree with you when he talked about his leadership philosophy, that he didn't really have one. That I kind of boiled it down to leadership intelligence. He had the leadership intelligence to understand what he needed to do to be successful, not just as an individual, but as a team and an organization. And he adapted that with the tools he had in his rucksack based on the operational environment that he found himself. And I wish I would have heard that a long time ago, because I thought we had a set leadership style, and this is my leadership style, and I'm going to go out forward and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, that episode you did with him, and when he made that comment, I was like, man, that's really impactful.
So, kind of continuing with your military service, because I know education is something that is near and dear to your heart. Did you have any challenges while you were in the military actively of pursuing any of those advanced educations as a soldier? And then what are some of the resources that you used and have used?
Okay, well, first, what I would say is, when I first came in 1995, going to school as an infantryman was not a thing.
Mm,
Right. It really was. It wasn't. It was your job was to go to the range. It was to do PT. It was to run faster. It was to run harder. That's what
Strong
we did.
Ranger.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we did. But I will say this, and I don't know which battalion commander it was because I'd like to give him credit. But he did set up one of our down periods. He set up for Jefferson Community College in Watertown to come in during lunchtime and give us a Composition 101 class. So that was
Mm,
really my first taste of a class in the military. And I like to tell people my job as a soldier always came first, always. So I may have two masters and I may have two graduate certificates, but I never put any of that before my job as a soldier. Now, I'll say this, in today's Army, I think having college education, whether it's one class or a degree or whatever, makes us a better soldier and makes us ready tonight. The So what worked for me, it was taking one class at a time. I took one class at a time because I think soldiers can overload themselves. If you're
yeah.
trying to do your job as a soldier and you're trying to take two classes, that's a lot, right? But so it took me 13 years to get my 4-year degree. And then after that, I got selected to go to the Sergeant Major's Academy as a student. And there at UTEP, University of Texas at El Paso, they offer graduate degrees at nighttime. So
Mm.
two nights a week, in addition to the Sergeant Major's course load, which if anyone listening doesn't know is pretty academic and strenuous. So I can, in 10 months, I earned my master's of public administration. And then
In
after that,
10 months.
in 10 months, that's a
Wow.
lot of work, a lot of work. Then I got selected for the fellowship at the academy and earned a master's of education. And that's what led me to kind of doing what I'm doing now.
So, what inspired you and inspires you to continue down that path of education? Because I have that same drive. I just don't, I literally don't have the time because something would have to give within my current role. It would either be my job, which is absolutely no fail job,
Yeah.
or my family. So, everything I want to do is a bucket list item. I plan to do that later. But what keeps you driven to go after these master's degrees? Because I'll tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. When I went to the Naval Postgraduate School and they forced me to get a systems engineering degree when I thought I was getting an MBA, and I have a criminal psychology bachelor's degree, I avoided math like the plague because not because I'm stupid, but because I just did not want to do it. And I was like, I'm never getting another degree. But now I find myself wanting to go get a doctorate degree, but specifically like in leadership studies, because that fascinates me. But what has kept you motivated just to pursue this high level of education?
I want to hit on two things with this one. Is I want to go back to balance here in a minute, but what drives me personally is going back to my dad. So
Mm,
initially, when I joined the Army out of high school, my dad, he said, "Son," I knew my parents. They were from West Virginia, right?
yeah,
That he did not have the money to send me to the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, which I think it's kind of interesting now. It's full circle because now I'm doing my doctorate there, which is interesting.
that's
So,
crazy.
I have all of my GI Bill, and I feel like my dad would be looking at me right now and saying, "Hey, Randy, you have this educational benefit. Why are you not using it?
Yeah.
Why are you not bettering yourself?" And that's truly why I'm doing it. I don't care for the title of doctor. I really don't. And humbly, I'll tell you, just recently during my transition, because of the things I've been doing over the last couple of years, people are seeking me out. I never thought in a million years that this young guy from Chattanooga would be offered to be flown to the University of Florida for a job interview.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and now I pulled my name out of the list of contestants for that position, but still, I went down there and did a 5-hour interview with a certain office, and was just humbling, and I thought I did really well. But after doing more reflection, came back to Columbus, Fort Moore, and I was like, I need to be here right now. And then another opportunity was presented because I'm also teaching classes at Georgia Military College here in Columbus.
Yeah.
And another opportunity opened up for me to take a full-time position at the Columbus location. And I actually submitted my application. And then like 2 or 3 days later, I withdrew that application because I'm like, right now I'm in this doctorate program. And this doctorate's only going to take me just a little bit over a year because of my 2 graduate certificates. So that's why I want to go back to this word balance. So what is that balance? And because everybody loves to throw around this word balance. And I even at the Strike Majors Academy, when I was instructing, I would try to get our small group to talk about what does balance mean? Because balance to you as a dad, what you may be doing 50, 80% your work, 10% to this, business or podcast leadership school that you have. And then the other 10% goes, I don't know what yours is, but I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
But that may be what you think is right, but what is right for your children, or what is right for your spouse? And a lot of times I don't think we know that we get the balance wrong until it's too late. But that's what drives me. So going back to the original question, it's really because my dad would be looking. I think he's saying to me, like, you have this benefit, the GI Bill. Why are you not using it to further develop yourself? Because my dad continued to read books, whether it was a car manual or a magazine or lawn and garden or whatever it was, until he died.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandfather, he would sit there and he would do Sudoku puzzles and read Western books. I think all the way up till 89 years old, but right before he passed away. But he was one of the sharpest men that I knew, and he would always just keep himself entertained. And I love how you went to the word balance, because you and I see it the same way. And I don't think balance is achievable. And I say this from a standpoint is that if we always try to chase balance, then we're chasing that moment in time of where we're comfortable. But life isn't like that, because we always have bins that are overflowing. And I break it down, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, is that work, family, self. So we always have to go to work. There's something that we have to get paid for, or we want to do, family, and then self-care. And I just break it up into those allotments. And I actually did an assessment, exactly what you just talked about. And I'm about 60, 30, 10. 60% goes to the Army on a normal day of my time. 30% goes to my family, and then 10% goes to myself. But it wasn't like that before. It was 60, 35, 5, with 5 being my family. And that's when I realized, like, I have to back off, because this is the most informative years for my kids. And I don't want to miss that, because I'm trying to chase my passion, which is leadership. And that's hard to realize. I was able to do it because I had an accountability partner, which was my wife. I kind of call it my accountability tree, someone who's like deeply rooted, that just doesn't want to hear anything and will keep you on a straight and narrow. But that's hard to do. How did you identify that?
The work-life balance, or
Understanding when you become unbalanced in a certain area and you have to reevaluate.
Well, so much like your spouse, your wife. So for me, I call it a circle of trust. And to me, my circle of trust is on about 5 people, right? And what I do is when I'm trying to take on this doctorate. So when I was deciding about the Georgia Military College position, the University of Florida position, that both of those positions I would have loved, and this doctorate, I run those by those 5 people. And I say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where my mind is. And I'll tell you, being here lately, thinking, metacognition, reflection, and we always think those are great things. But I'll tell you, here lately, for somebody who's made decisions for 29 years and advised commanders on making decisions on what I thought was the appropriate decision, man, it's hard. It's hard to make those decisions. So I rely on those, what I call my circle of trust, to help me to make sure that I'm not overburdening myself.
I love that, man. A circle of trust. It's like an individual mastermind or accountability group that you can vet and validate your decisions on. That's awesome. I want to go back to something that you talked about before, and it was the Georgia Military College. So I know that you do a couple classes. I think it's Leadership 201 and then Leadership 101 within that class. What are some of the fundamentals that you're teaching in that class that could apply to leadership? Anyone who's listening.
So the first one is leadership and college success. So really, the only thing that one is getting after is college success tips. What will make you successful in college? And one example of that would be a lot of students going, like first generation college students, don't know what it means when we talk about instructor hours. Certain demographics in our country think, oh well, that's instructor's hours. That's times that you don't bother them, right? But that's not the case. That's the time when you're supposed to go bother them and
Yeah.
say, hey, professor, hey, instructor, I don't understand this concept. I don't understand this theory. And that's their office hours. That's when you're supposed to go see them. So we go over that, and it's really just setting the students up for being successful college students. And it's really a fun course. The other course is basically getting after being a creative and critical thinker, which we value in the military.
I think critical thinking, and that was something that you talked about before, of why it's so important to the military, is that it helps bridge the gap between theoretical and problem solving, if that makes sense, like book answers versus actually being a problem solver. Some of the material that I took, like software coding and all that stuff, I will never use.
Mhm.
But what I did learn was how to critically think through problems. And if you've ever heard the term engineering V, verification, validation, and the bridge of kind of like making decisions, I think education from that standpoint helps us be a more critical thinker, or at the end of the day, a problem solver. And that's why education, I agree with you wholeheartedly, is so vitally important within the military, because it teaches our young service members how to think through problems that you may not truly get any experience with, even going through real world events. But going through these complex ideas, it rewires your brain in a way of critically thinking through issues.
Yeah, and one of the ways I get after that in the course I lead is group work. So a
Uh,
lot of times what I'll do is I'll have the student write down their answer, what their belief is, or whatever the answer, what they believe the answer is to the problem on a 3x5 card, and then that way I know what they were initially thinking, and then I'll tell them share that with your classmate, and then I'll put them in a larger group, and then sometimes I'll even divide them, and I will get them to go on the opposite side of what they believed about a topic, and now they have to argue the opposite of what they believed to try to get open their mind, that critical and creative thinking.
Today's show sponsor comes from 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. They are a philanthropic, award-winning craft distillery located in the heart of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. For being a listener of Tales of Leadership, you get 10% off on any order using the promo code Pando Commando when you place an order at 10thwhiskey.com. Both of those are in the show notes, so you'll be able to find them. 10th Mountain Whiskeys and Spirit Company honors heroes and they craft legacy. I've commanded 2 organizations in the 10th Mountain, and both of which are very deeply impactful to me. This is a company that I stand behind. And if you're looking for a great bottle of bourbon, look no further at 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. Back to the show. That was what I had to do, that exercise in college, and I hated that exercise the most because I was dead set on like, okay, this is my thought, this is the way that I see this problem. Oh, now you have to flip that
Yeah, it
180.
challenges us. No one wants to challenge your beliefs.
So some of the roles and titles that you had before we get to the McCoin Institute, I know you were so were you a platoon sergeant in 22 before you were an observer coach trainer, or how did that work for you?
Yeah. So I was with so I think you probably came, if I'm guessing right, after I left 22. I was with them from 2010 to 2012, and I was on that 2011 tour to Afghanistan,
Yep.
and I was a platoon sergeant for half of that, and then the other half I was the battle NCO in the battalion talk. And then when I came back from that deployment, Sergeant Major Tag, who ultimately made it up to be a 4-star nominative sergeant major, he moved me in to be the first sergeant of the forward support company, I don't know what it was when you were there, but I think it was Fox Company 201. I don't know if it was still the same when you were there, but and then immediately after that, I was only back there for like 6 months, and HRC was well. This is when the brigade. You were at Fort Knox, right?
I've been
No,
to
no,
Fort
you were at
Knox.
Fort Polk. I
Yeah, I
mean,
was
not
at
Fort
Fort
Polk,
Polk.
Fort Johnson now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Fort
okay,
Johnson.
yeah, get it straight. But I was at that time period that the brigade, Third Brigade, First ID was at Fort Knox. And
Okay.
so when about 6 months after being back, we had a meeting with the lieutenant colonel that was over the infantry branch there at HRC, and I had come down on orders initially to go to NTC, and I was like, hey, I want to go to another deploying brigade. This is what I want to do. I want to deploy. And this lieutenant colonel was like, well, I'm sorry, you've been selected to be an OC, and that's it. And I had no interest in going to NTC. And he said, look, and this is what he told me. He said, look, it's probably a good thing that we selected you to be an OC. And I didn't kind of know what he was laying down at the moment. But at that time, HRC was actually selecting people to be OCTs. And so then I said, well, can I at least go to Fort Polk at the time versus NTC? Because I'm not a desert person. I'm just not. And he says, well, we can do that for you. And so they sent me to Fort Polk, now Fort Johnson Task Force 2. And about 4 months later, my name popped out on the E8 first round list.
So that is a small world. So I think Delta Company was Dingo Company when we were going through. Alpha Company was Wolf Company, Bear, Cobra. We're all named after animals when we were there, and then HAC was Hawk Company. But I did my OCT time first, and it was funny because mine went the exact same way. I had a meeting with Branch at the Maneuver Center of Excellence after I was finishing the captain's career course. And I just, dead set, just got back from 2-2 Brigade out at Fort Lewis under 4th Battalion, 23rd Infantry Regiment, deployed to Afghanistan during a combat deployment. I was all motivated. I went in there with the mindset that I'm going to be the very last person that Branch talks to because they're going to remember me. Horrible decision. And if anyone's listened to that, never be the last person, because that basically means all the slots were filled when I went. They're like, all right, well, you have two options. You can go be an IBOLIC instructor, or you can go to a CTC rotation. And I was like, well, I've already been a platoon leader. I don't want to learn, and as bad as that sounds, to be a better platoon leader. I want to move forward and learn how to be a company commander. So if I have to choose, I will choose a CTC. And then I chose JROTC. And I also fell in under 2-2 or Task Force 2 as well. So I was there as a platoon walker for 6 months, and then I transitioned. I got lucky. I was able to do a company walker. I think I was Yankee 02 for about 18 months. I think I had like about 26 rotations roughly between that and being in 2-2. But that set me up for success of being a company commander, because I saw all these different leaders come through. I call it Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, the ugly, of how to be an effective leader. And it was really cheating in a way. So when I was able to take over a company, I had all the answers to the test.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've often tell people that, when I was Yankee 30 November, that I could tell from my first engagement with the company, from when we'd first go meet them. You probably remember doing that.
Yep.
I could tell by the unit's discipline how well they were going to perform throughout the rotation.
Yep.
And that really impacted me. So when I went out and did more leadership positions, that's why I was like discipline, initiative. Like when you had units that came in where soldiers weren't standing at parade rest for their soldiers, or NCOs, just kind of borderline disrespect stuff, that unit was probably going to be crappy, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
When you had units that came in there and they were uniform looked good, equipment looked good, all that stuff, they were going to do pretty well in the rotation.
So the next thing I want to kind of transition to, because I could keep going. There's so much stuff that I want to pull from there. But the McCoin Institute, walk me through you forming that, the vision, the mission of what you wanted to achieve with the McCoin Institute.
So I formed it because, counseling and mentoring soldiers and going through education myself, like I said, early on, it was a struggle because people didn't know, the options or opportunities to go to school. And so,
Yeah.
I think I figured it out. And when I was counseling my platoons in my company on going to school, my subordinates, I just kind of honestly, I just fell in love with it. It's mentoring at its finest,
Mm.
or leading at its finest. I don't know what you call it, but I just fell in love with that process of coaching, mentoring, developing other people. So, that's when I looked at my dad being a lifelong learner. I said, hey, I'm going to name it after him. And basically, the McCoin Institute, really all it is a community of practice. It's a community of practice that shares the latest trends and the best practices. And it's really for those people who support, like the people at the education office, or the education office at a major university like the University of Florida. It's really for those individuals to earn these certificates, so that they can better advise our veteran and our service members and our military connected students on career and educational opportunities, whether it's using their TA, tuition assistance, or their GI Bill, or looking at different programs. Some of the new stuff out there, some people don't want to get degrees anymore. They want
Yeah.
to get these micro certificates. And, I can't argue against that, because some of these micro certificates, like you can get a coding certificate from the University of Texas at Austin for about 6 months and be very marketable.
There are so many different academic, educational benefits and programs that are out there. I will tell you, though, that I've noticed, at least over the past 2 years, that they're starting to dwindle in a way. And like a specific example, you shared one on LinkedIn not too long ago, but one that comes to my mind is the Army credentialing program. The
Mhm.
Army used to give $4,000 a year with no ADSO to go pursue whatever certification you want. And I was able to get the RBLP certification through that. But now they're changing it to where it's no longer a $4,000 a year. I think it's $1,000 a year is the max, up to $4,000 for the lifetime of service. So things are constantly changing. And I say that from a standpoint that it's awesome that you have the McCoin Institute that provides or weaponizes all of that to service members who want to go pursue education. Because to be honest, we are only going to wear a uniform for a very minute period of time within our lives. Even general officers, they're in for 37 years. You're probably going to have another job afterwards. At the end of the day. And that's such a small percentage of people who make it to that level. And could you share some key initiatives or projects that you're currently working on within the McCoin Institute?
Yeah. So one thing I think I'd like to share, and hopefully the listeners will share, is on the McCoin Institute website, McCoininstitute.com, there's a link where service members or veterans, Marines, soldiers, airmen, whatever, can take a self-paced course, and that course is free. As of right now, first of all, since 2011 up until now, I've never charged for anything.
I
So
love
all
it.
of this is coming out of my pocket. And maybe someday when I'm out of the Army, I'll charge for some of the more professional certificates. But this particular certificate, college success for military connected students and veterans, will always be free. That is my mission, because I want soldiers to be able to log on there, Marines log on there, airmen log on there, Guardians log on there, and take that course. And basically, it goes over things like how to use your TA,
Hmm.
tips for being successful in college, how to use your GI Bill, when should you use your GI Bill, when should you not use it, those type of things. So it's really good for somebody who has never been to college, or maybe they're transitioning back into college. Maybe they went to school as a civilian, now they're a service member, and they're wanting to go to school and they don't know exactly. It irritates me when I find a student at the PX or clothing sales. I talk to them and I'm like, well, where's the education office? And they have no clue. They don't even know who their educational counselor is.
Yep.
So, one of the things it talks about in there is building connections. Relationships matter, and if you're going to go to college, build a connection with your professor or your instructor early and often. Don't call on them the night before you need them, because now it's too late, right? So that's the biggest thing.
There's a quote by Winston Churchill that I love, that we make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. And I genuinely believe by giving and thank you for that. I know it's not easy. So I do leadership coaching 100% free, and it will always be free for service members. No matter wherever I go with this, that's something that is deeply passionate, at least from my perspective. And the world needs more people like you, Randy, that are willing to make those types of sacrifices to make this world a better place. So that's awesome. It's time for our final show segment that I like to call the Killer Bees. These are the same 4 questions that I ask every guest on the Tales of Leadership podcast. Be brief, be brilliant, be present, and be gone. Question 1. What do you believe separates a good leader from a great leader?
I think it goes back to what I said initially, to be willing to care and take action. It's just, we make leadership complicated, but I don't think it's complicated at all. Just have a willingness to care. And once you see a fault or whatever, take action to correct it.
So, second question, and this is probably going to be a hard one for you because I know you're going to have so many that come to mind. If you could share one resource with our listeners to help them grow their leadership, what would it be?
So the one I want to talk about is the DOD. I'm going to give you a website, www.dod.mou.com. And what that is it's a way for people to validate that the school they're going to is regionally accredited. And that's important. Regional accreditation is important. And when I advise students or veterans, I want to make sure, there's some nationally accredited schools that are great schools and institution, and learning is learning, in my opinion. But if you're going to spend your time, spend your GI Bill, spend your tuition assistance and your energy, I think you should be spending it on something that's going to be able to transfer to other major universities like the University of Alabama, the University of Florida, the University of Tennessee. And so that means that your schools really need to be regionally accredited. And you can validate that by going to www.dodmou.com. And it's a government website. And all you got to do is put the school in there, and it'll show you all the schools in the country. And it'll tell you if it's a for-profit school. It'll tell you if it's a public school. It'll tell you if it's a private school. It'll tell you how many students are going to that school using their GI benefits. So that's a resource I'd like to share with your audience.
That's awesome. I've never heard that. So that's definitely a new resource that hasn't been shared on this. So that's great. Question 3. If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be and why?
I wish I would have fallen in love with learning earlier. In high school, I did well in high school, and I got through high school. My main focus was JRTC, of course, but yeah. I wished I would have applied myself more or earlier in my academic journey in life. I'd probably be somewhere different than I am now. Not that I'm not disappointed on where I'm at, but I just wish I would have fallen in love with learning earlier.
I think we all can set a path. I always go back to Proverbs 19:21. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but we all establish our footstep, but the Lord's kind of determined our path. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the path that you're currently on, because I genuinely believe that you're the right man for the job to help make a change when it comes to academics and education within the military. And you're getting ready to transition now from over 26 years of service, I believe.
29.
I don't want to cut you short. Yeah. Wow. So that's humbling in itself. And now you're getting ready to do this full time. And I'm excited to see where that goes. And the last question is, how can our listeners find you and add value to your mission?
Yeah, so almost all social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, please like and follow, Instagram, Twitter, like and follow, share those with people who you think might need some of our resources. And the more they share, the better it helps the McCoin Institute mission and vision.
Yeah. Randy, this has been an amazing episode, long overdue. The next time I go to Fort Moore, which I'll probably be going to the Maneuver Center of Excellence soon, I look forward to catching up with you, brother.
Yeah, please hit me up.
Have a great night.
All right, thanks.
All right, team, it is time for our after action review. That was a great episode with Randy. It's funny that I'm constrained by time. I get off work at 6 o'clock. I went to my kids' soccer game, 7 o'clock to 8. filming this episode and I get up at 4 every morning to go back to work. I'm constrained by time. I wish that I had the time like Joe Rogan to film a 2 to 3 hour podcast. If you're listening to this, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I absolutely wish I did, because I have so many questions that I didn't even get a chance to ask Randy. But he is a true purposeful accountable leader. He is a servant leader. So it's time for our after action review. What are the top 3 takeaways that I pulled from this AR? I would love to hear yours as well. So the first one that I have and that we share is love, of defining that as terms of leadership. I think love comes down to one word, and that's meekness. Meekness is defined as we break the word down. It's not weakness, it's engaged listening, it's evaluating the moment, and it's keeping a servant heart. At the end of the day, leaders that can do those things and lead with hugs, which is kind of a weird acronym, but hear me out: humility, understanding, gratitude, and a servant heart, then they can show up authentic and they can inspire other people. And we both share that. We both come from combat arms, and we both have walked the same path. We've literally been in the same battalion and served in the same organizations. So the next key takeaway that I have is grit. And I think grit is one of those words that is easy to define, but it's truly hard to master. So if we want to break down what the word grit truly means, I've done this. You're welcome. I've created an acronym for it. It starts off with guts. It takes a leader who has the guts. And number 2, it takes leaders who have a resilient spirit. And number 3, it takes leaders who have integrity. And then number 4, it takes leaders with tenacity to make a difference. Hard things happen. Leadership is not easy. It is filled with obstacles. It is filled with minefields, and you need people that have grit, who had hard work ethic. And that was connected through our shared experience of West Virginia. If you've never been to West Virginia, the theme of the state, if you drive in, you'll see the big sign, wild and wonderful. It truly is wild and wonderful. It is an extremely rural state with some of the most majestic, beautiful landscape that you'll ever see. The rolling hills of Appalachia is home to me. I feel home when I'm there. I love bluegrass. I love all of it. I'm actually getting ready to go back next weekend with my family to go trout fishing and spring gobbler hunting, which I'm really excited for. But what you don't see is the grit that people have there, because it is a different type of life that most Americans never experience. I grew up in a single family household. My father was a coal miner. He worked almost every single hour. I never really got a chance to see him that much until I got older, and my parents unfortunately got a divorce. I grew up in a poverty household of where we had a lot of our basic needs met through hunting, deer meat, trout, which was great. I had a beautiful childhood. I loved my childhood, but it's a different level of grit that people have there. And that's where that shared experience has. So number 3 is critical thinking. Leadership at its core comes down to the acronym I always talk about, T-ball. Thoughts shape beliefs, beliefs drive our actions, and actions define our legacy. Critical thinking is part of that, because if we want to solve complex problems, we have to have the ability to actively listen, understand our options, weigh those options to mitigate risk, and then to move forward. And through education, which is one of Randy's passions in life, you learn how to critically think through problems. And it's not necessarily the education that is going to change your trajectory in life, right? Getting a degree, getting a bachelor's degree, having a master's degree has given me more opportunities. But what I've learned out of those opportunities is to critically think. And systems engineering was one of the best ways, because you view problems differently now. And now I view problems differently. And the critical thinking skills that I've learned through academics, I apply in real world scenarios. All right, team. do me a favor. If you like this podcast, make sure you share this episode. Make sure you rate it. Give me a 5-star review. Make sure you leave a comment. If follow me on social media, go to McMillionLeadershipCoaching.com. You can find additional resources, and I do this all for free because I want you to be armed with the best information possible to be the best leader possible. Be a purposeful, accountable leader. Be a leader that this world needs. As always, I'm your host, Josh McMillian, saying every day is a gift. Don't waste yours. I'll see you next time.